Okay. Good noon, everyone. It's my great pleasure to introduce Joseph Roche, an associate professor of education at Trinity College Dublin, an international recognized leader in science and society research. He's the director of research for the School of Education, where he leads innovative international projects that explore the role of science in society, basically focus on science communication and citizen science and public engagement. Among his many contributions, he was the coordinator of the Horizon 2020 Global Scape project, and which has as objective to understand successes and challenges in global science communication practices. And right now, he's a partner leader in COALESCE, and together with the University of Valencia, we are working on a package related to the impact pathway and sustainability in COALESCE. And his distinguished career include working at NASA and serving as visiting scholar at Harvard University. At Trinity College, he leads the Science Associated Research Group, which is the forefront of fostering collaboration between science and education to benefit society. He is also the author of the highly regarded textbooks, Essential Skill of Early Career Researchers. His recent publication include Bridging Science, Citizen Science and Science Communication this year in 2024, and the critical studies of the global practices of science communication in general. He is also recognized for his work on the dynamics of social media engagement within the scientific community. And today we have the privilege to have him share his insight in a talk titled European Vision and Approach through the COALESCE project on the challenges of science communication in changing environments. Thank you for your being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Carolina. And thank you to all of you. It's a pleasure to be here. You could see I was getting more and more embarrassed during that biography. That is so up to date. That's better than any of my biographies. It's got everything. Really impressive. I don't know if I really live up to the introduction, but that's very kind of you. Thank you. So I'm going to be speaking to you, and I know I'm sitting between many of us and lunch and possibly trains. So I won't spend too much time on me, because I think we've covered that. But I want to talk to you about the COALESCE project. And you've probably heard a little bit about it the last couple of days. Some of you will know it very well. We have some other members of the COALESCE team here, and really any of us could have given this presentation from the COALESCE perspective. I'm really honored and delighted to be the person giving the presentation today, because in a way I'm a little bit removed, because I'm from Ireland. If you haven't guessed already, I'm Irish, and I think that adds a little bit of a different perspective than maybe I know a lot of you are based in Spain or nearby. And so I think I can be a little bit objective when I'm able to praise the work that's happening in Spain. So hopefully we'll get through that. I also was reflecting a little bit on Annetta's presentation this morning, and she was speaking about how there is a challenge for us sometimes between the value of science and then we as science communicators. How do we convey or not convey our values, or should we or shouldn't we? That's always a challenge, always a conversation. I have a very strong feeling about that, which maybe after the presentation, if we have time for questions, we can delve into a little bit more. But just to give you my initial thoughts, I'm very lucky in my university. I'm in, as you can see, Trinity College in Dublin. It's a 430-year-old university in the center of Dublin. And up until recently, it never taught science communication. It was never part of its curriculum. They have trusted me to bring science communication into the curriculum, which comes with a responsibility after 430 years. Although, you know, a lot of those 430 years weren't great. They only allowed women into the university in the last 100 years. So, you know, we don't really count the first few hundred years, but still it's a big deal for the university to be moving towards science communication. And I take it as a personal honor, privilege. The way I teach science communication is on our undergraduate science degree. So like many universities, probably one of the biggest courses you can have in a standard university is the general science degree. Science or engineering degrees are often one of the biggest intakes. So I'm the only social scientist who gets to teach the undergraduate science students in their first year. They do their natural science, physical science, health science, these several hundred scientists, and then they get one social science module from me. And I've been wrestling with that dilemma that Annette has brought up about views and values, because it's just me. It's just me that they have to deal with, several hundred of them, and I do wrestle a lot with that responsibility. So where I've settled is teaching them. I say, look, you're already learning to be scientists. You're the future generation of scientists. I'm going to be trying to convince you with this module of the value, the importance of science communication. And we go through the traditional things like science communication as a discipline, the theory, some of the practice, the skills that I feel scientists need in terms of presenting, academic publishing, engaging the media. But we also go a little bit broader and look at the values of being a scientist. And we tap into a little bit the responsibility that I feel anyone who is privileged enough to have access to science education and to become a scientist maybe has an additional responsibility, whether they choose to accept it or not, to society. And that's where I take my stance. As I say to the students, I cannot teach you science communication without some of my values coming through. I just can't do it as an educator, as a teacher, as a scholar. It's impossible for me to convey science communication without those values seeping through. So instead of striving for a value-free environment, the way I teach science communication is I say to my students, I'm striving instead for a value-fair environment where I share my values with the caveat that that's biasing my views, and then trusting them as our next generation of scientists to make the decision for themselves, to use their scientific thinking to choose if they align with my values or not. And each is fine. It's okay if they don't align with my values at all, as long as they recognize that my values are probably shaping the education they're engaged in. And I do like that sense of trust in the classroom, and that usually gives me optimism about how we might do better with science in society. I think the biggest thing we struggle with in Ireland is our sense of trust, and anything we can do to build trust, to make it stronger, and to make science more open and accessible has been shown to help. So that's my view on the values in science communication. The project, just in case for some of you who might not be familiar with the project itself, the COALESCE project is a project that is funded by the European Commission for the next few years to establish a European Competence Centre for Science Communication. We've had lots of conversations already the last few days about language, and competence is an interesting word. I think maybe it's not the easiest word for us to have in the English language, but I think maybe in other languages it possibly makes more sense. And then, like with everything with the European Commission, when you have 27 countries involved and lots of different languages, what you end up with is maybe not always perfect, but it's good. It's robust. There's lots of people who've agreed to it. You'll see that we're running since April 2023. We have a few more years. We have a budget of €3 million to establish this European Competence Centre for Science Communication. That might sound like a lot of money initially, until you see that we have several years to stretch that money out. We have 13 partners from 8 countries, and suddenly to try and make the future of science communication robust in this continent, maybe that's not as much money as we would like to receive from the European Commission, but that's a conversation for later. We're delighted we have this money, this project, and why it is relevant now. I mean, we could change this slide every week, every day almost, considering just reading the news and what's happening. When we were writing this proposal first, the COVID-19 pandemic was fresh in our minds. The climate crisis was looming, the energy crisis, housing crises. all of these things were in our mind, and they form the basis for why we feel as members of the COALESCE project that we have to do this work, that we have to establish a center that is open and accessible to all of us and that supports all of our work in this field that we love. Again, I don't want to delve too much into my own personal stake in this, but if I'm going to be honest with you, like I would be with my students about being value fair, I'm like a middle-aged Irish man, and my relationship with Europe is a little bit complicated. Sometimes people wonder why, whenever there are polls of people's trust of the European Commission, why Ireland scores so highly. And it's because most of the people voting are my generation, or the generation ahead of me, or the generation below me. All of us in our generation in Ireland can remember what it was like to be poor. In the 70s and 80s in Ireland, we were still one of the poorest countries in Europe. Not just poor, but the term we would use is backwards. Like, a lot of our systems were not functioning. A lot of our social standings, the views on society were either conservative or problematic. And tied with our membership of the European Union from the 1970s onwards, we got a lot of money by being part of the European Commission. And within the space of a few decades, we went from being a very poor, conservative, backwards country to being a country that now I feel proud to be from, which is weird because usually Irish people have a lot of guilt and a strange relationship with our country and our history. But I do like that in the last few decades we have moved to a more progressive, open, and accessible version of where we were. We've had seminal public referendums on gay marriage and abortion, which would have been unthinkable even a few decades ago. And we have a thriving economy. Like I said, most of us in my generation remember being poor. Most of us are now middle class. That's happened within the space of 30 years, that we went from being mostly people who were considered poor and working class to now being at least middle class, having access to education, having services that are provided to us. And so anytime I am part of a European project, it's a big deal for me. But also a caveat is that despite Ireland being very progressive, we still have incredibly problematic issues in our society. Our governments, successive governments, and I know we've had conversations about our challenges with government and authority. In the history of my country, there has been only one of two political parties who have always been in power for the last 100 years. Usually it oscillated between them. They changed hands up until the very last government. For the first time, they came into power together to stop another political party getting in power. And after our general election last week, it looks like it's going to be those two parties again who are in power. They've overseen Ireland becoming a wealthy country and a somewhat progressive country, but there's still really deep issues, particularly around science communication, and research. The government in Ireland portrays our country as being knowledge-led, knowledge-based, exporting goods, but also services, and mainly a talented, educated workforce. And they're happy to say that. They're happy to portray that view of Ireland. Yet we've never matched the European average for investment in science. In the last 10 years, Ireland has gone from a net beneficiary of money from Europe to being a net contributor. Probably a little bit late, because we did have decades of taking money from Europe and benefiting, and it's high time we started contributing. But only within the last 10 years have we shifted from a receiver of funds to a contributor. And throughout that time, and even in the last 10 years, we still are not at the average level in Europe of funding science in our country. And to me, the desire and the opportunity to work with other people in Europe on science communication is not just something nice to have. It's essential, because my background is astrophysics. I studied astrophysics, as any optimistic young scientist wood, hoping to study science and make a career in it, until I was finishing my PhD during the recession, the last recession we had, and the Irish government decided to cut all funding for basic research, which any evidence we have over decades, centuries now, is that if you put any sort of investment into science, discovery science, basic research, blue skies research, whichever term you use, it's one of the most effective ways to guarantee an economic return on your investment in science. And yet the Irish government chose to ignore all evidence and just try and cherry pick a couple of areas that they wish to fund, that they felt would benefit the economy, which is such a short-sighted way of doing science, is a short-sighted way of investing in science, which was framed, I'm sure, entirely based on them trying to win an election. So that's why I find myself in science communication, because I couldn't continue as an astrophysicist in my country. There was no funding for it. The same is true of particle physicists, mathematicians. Any of our discovery scientists could not work in science in our country unless, and this is a big unless we were funded from the European Commission. And again, that'll tell you a little bit about my values. This is why I'm so pro-European and why I find myself so indebted and inspired by being part of European projects, because it's the only way for Irish scientists to actually conduct blue skies basic research. And that's why I'm incredibly passionate about why is this project relevant now? For me, it's always been relevant, and it will continue to be so until things change. In my country, it's not going to change. The elections were last week. We have the same government we had before. Looking at other countries, it's not the worst. There are cases where democracy is at stake. In Ireland, we have a relatively dull, boring government, and we've had for decades. What I was heartened by is that this election last week was the first time we had the sheer number of far-right candidates running for election. But the good news is that none of them were elected, which is a positive. But without a project like COALESCE, I'm not sure if my country can be part of a conversation on science and science communication. And so we have our priority areas, but all of them, I feel, are influenced and affected by things like democracy, trust. We're not in a vacuum. We are shaped and slaves in some way to the systems we find ourselves part of, and that includes the political systems. So yeah, our priority areas, you can see, are quite broad. All of the things you would expect, like health and vaccines after a pandemic, climate, we don't need to emphasize how important that is for all of us, and AI, water, oceans, and soils. You might ask yourself, who gave us this right to try and establish a European Science Communication Centre, and why are we trusted? And the reason that it's those of us involved, the reason we're trusted, is because the European Commission wanted this centre to be built on 8 Horizon 2020 projects. Now, again, for someone who cares about science communication, this is a pivotal moment, because the European Commission has never before funded science communication research until these projects. So the European Commission, through its various FP programs, FP1 to, I think we're up to about FP9 at the moment, recently called Horizon 2020 or Horizon Europe, those funding programs have often funded science communication support, or they would fund things like coordination and support actions, where they would help the practice of science communication. But only once have they ever funded science communication research directly. They did it between 2018 and 2020. They had three openings of this call, and through it they funded 8 separate projects, a little bit more than 10 million euro. And the great thing about those projects was, because all of us leading those projects, and I should point out, critically, 2 of them were led by Spanish coordinators. So if ever you are questioning yourselves as Spanish leaders of science communication, you're not only leading in this country, you're leading in the continent. You have a responsibility, whether you like my students, whether you wish to accept that responsibility or not, you have the rest of us watching and looking to you for guidance. So thank you for having that position of power, and please remember that responsibility as well. But these 8 projects, the nice thing is, because they were led by people working in the field of science communication, it's kind of within our nature as interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary researchers to communicate, to talk to each other. And so just by virtue of us being funded in the same space, we all worked together. Even though the Commission didn't really need us to or expect us to, it just seemed natural to us that we would collaborate and we would work together, which I think is the most important ethos and spirit that underpins science communication and underpins the COALESCE project. And all 8 of these projects are now included in the COALESCE project. So we built on these 8 projects, and we can harness what those projects did and what we learned from those projects, but it also gives us a way of trying to expand further and involve everyone else who is interested in this field, anyone who wishes to join us. The way we're doing that is through, again, probably typical European Commission speak, the 4H stakeholders. 4H stands for the 4 helixes, or the 4 helix model, which is already kind of being replaced maybe by the 5 helix system. But the 4 helix was initially bringing together academia, industry, government, and public audiences. Now, with the quintuple helix, the 5th helix is that we're reminded maybe the environment should be a clear part of that as well. But regardless of whatever term we use that's in vogue with Europe speak, that's how we would do our work anyway. It makes no sense to work as science communicators if we're not involving all of the people who hold a stake in this area. So over the first couple of years of the project, we're now in a lovely situation where we have 800 registrations in our community of practice. We have 18 national and regional hubs. So they're the physical spaces where science communication will happen through the COALESCE project. And you'll see the networks, the alliances. We're in a very privileged position, but we also cannot stop or rest until everyone feels like they have had an opportunity to join us or to find a way to be part of the project. I know time is short, so I'm going to wrap up quickly. I just wanted to mention the national and regional hubs, because when we talk about this project to establish a center, people sometimes think, where is the center? What is the space? I'll show you in a moment the virtual space, the platform we have for this competence center for science communication. But we also have this network of physical hubs. So these are not just the partners in the project, but also other organizations that are doing excellent work in science communication, who are leading the science communication in their region or their country, and where we have a dialogue, where they tell us what's happening, they tell us what we need to learn as a center. And likewise, with all the knowledge and data and evidence we're gathering, we then provide resources and tools or support for those hubs as well. That's in my view the only way science communication can work in this continent. If we have the same dialogue that we would in science communication practice has to be part of how we work as researchers and practitioners. And look how happy everyone is. If you bring people together to work on science communication and have a collaborative, pan-European, multinational, transdisciplinary group of people, they're going to have the biggest of smiles, of course, because it's a wonderful thing to be able to be part of, to have a privilege to be part of. The virtual space is scicomcenter.eu. It's been launched recently, and I would encourage you all to maybe check it out, bring it back to your networks, consider how you feel about this platform, consider how you feel about our project trying to engage people in this platform, and let us know what you think we can do better, or let us know how we can help you, or let us know how you can help us. There's many ways you can find your way into this project, and as long as you're roughly in the same page as us, which listening to you for 2 days, I think we all are. I think we all have, even though maybe our values might be slightly different, we all seem to have a care and a love and a passion for science communication and for trust and truth and social justice. So like I said, the launch just happened recently. The virtual platform is now live. There's lots more to be added to it, lots more coming. But the thing that I want to draw your attention to, which was mentioned yesterday as well, is the Crisis Navigator. This is the kind of first of our tools that we want to share with people. We want people to use, to try out, to test, to break maybe, possibly, and to give us your feedback and your advice and your thoughts, and also your advice on how we can use it to help with the rapid mobilization of science communication, how we can use it to anticipate challenges, and how we can help use it to connect each other in times of crisis. So I won't go into it again. It was discussed yesterday, but it is something that I think is a way for maybe all of us to be sharing our work on COALESCE at the moment. I don't even know really how to talk about the floods in Valencia, and I don't really think I can do it justice given the conversations here. I think much smarter, much more eloquent people have discussed it. But what I think about is how there's no positive to take from such a horrible tragedy. But one thing that is very clear in my mind is that from my experience with people from Valencia, they're some of the strongest, smartest, most resilient people I've ever met. And I know that because the University of Valencia, as well as Science for Change and FACIT, two other Spanish partners, are part of the COALESCE project, I know that when the time happens that another country, another community faces a challenge, the learnings here will be shared. And to me, that's important. It's not, there's nothing we can do to soften the tragedy, but knowing that other people might be saved by the learnings, or even just helping other countries, potentially Ireland, my country, learn how to deal with governments and authorities that don't always seem to have our best interests at heart. That's something that I'll be keen to learn from the experience here. The second launch of the tools on the center are coming up, and hopefully something to get excited about. Please follow us so we can tell you all about them. And then, yeah, just one more photo of how happy everyone is. If I haven't convinced you yet how lovely it is to work with the COALESCE team, then yeah. Oh, and it's also supposed to show the logos, but I prefer the smiling faces are nicer than the logos. And yeah, just to say thank you for having me here. Thank you to Carolina and Isabel and our colleagues at the University of Valencia. It's a privilege to be here, and all I can say is, as an external person from Ireland, well done to you for the work you're doing, not just in Valencia, but in this country. And I'm excited about what we might be able to do together. Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you so much. It's a close presentation, but we open the discussion if you want to ask something about the COALESCE, maybe. No? It's okay? No questions? Yeah, Annette. It's okay.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation and the spirit you're offering. That's really great. I think, well, we talked about this after my talk already. I think we should address the question of AI. And well, I can just offer that we have this Red AI Center in Germany, and there are others all over Europe. So maybe that could be an interesting issue we should maybe address. That came to my mind after the many discussions we had here. So how is AI changing the news and information environment, our relationship with truth? Is it a factor that is going to more and more undermine, or even more undermine, our relationship with truth and trust? Or can it be a tool of strengthening science communication because it has both potentials? I think this is a super important topic. So yeah, just adding this. And then please leave Twitter. Thanks.
Yes, I agreed. I think we probably will. I think the migration to Blue Sky is afoot, and there's lots of European projects that are already embarking on that. The slides, I should say, other than the Twitter thing that needs to be updated, I really like the slides. They're not mine. So Joanna has just left, but she should take credit for the gorgeous slides, and I shouldn't be taking credit for them. I think AI, it is one of our priority areas, and I like it's just something we can't ignore. I think if we choose to ignore AI, then we're going to be left behind, because it's going to be part of everything, whether we we like it or not. Even in my university, we had like maybe 1 year of thinking we're going to try and stop our students from using AI before we quickly realized that's never going to work. And the only way we can really stay not even ahead of the conversation, because I don't think you can with AI, but just staying part of the conversation, is by having open, honest conversations with our students. And probably we'll need to do something in the science communication space as well, where we have to say, this is how we think AI can be used ethically and responsibly. What we've settled for our students is that we ask them to think of AI as their critical friend. So they're allowed to ask a friend of theirs for their views on their assignments, and take their views into account and update their assignments before they submit it. They can't ask their friend to write the assignment for them and submit it. So for a tool to get perspective, or to, like, I think the thing AI is incredibly good at is pattern recognition, which something humans are not so good at. And if we're doing something in a transdisciplinary space where we're trying to do science communication across continents, AI would be much more efficient for us at looking at the patterns affecting how science is communicated and how science works in general. We just need to make sure that the people involved are qualified to use that evidence and that data responsibly. And also, how are we even gathering that data? If we're gathering data from Twitter, and that's being led by someone whose views and values probably don't align with our own, then that's another conversation we need to have. So yeah, I agree. I don't have that answer either. It's just another comment to your comment that we've no choice but to engage in the AI conversation together.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you very much. It's great. Yeah, it's very exciting. One question I have is around the kind of, you talk about the idea is to have a sustainable center. The funding is not sustainable, it turns out. So I'm wondering how that kind of misalignment might be rectified, if there's an aspiration, if there's a sense of what might happen then, next, what might be useful to have, what support is needed, what might be, like, what's the plan, and what would help? How can we, as people in science communication who care about this, how can we contribute? How can we help? What can we do, if anything?
Thank you. Great question. The €3 million question. Yeah, it will be. It's, yeah, because to make anything sustainable, you need funds. So I guess there's a couple of things here, and my colleagues might have views on this as well, because it's a consortium. There's a lot of us involved. I think initially we were surprised that the European Commission put that in the call and said it has to be sustainable within 3 years. But as any of you who've worked on funding calls and proposals, you kind of have to write your proposal saying we will try to do that, and that's what we're doing. We are trying to make it sustainable in 3 years. I think the Commission, as our funder, is quite aware that that doesn't mean we're certain it will succeed. And in a way, like, part of me kind of hopes we don't, because I think we shouldn't be dependent on creating money and funds to do this without, for example, the support of the European Commission. I think the European Commission has a responsibility to keep something like this going, and also maybe to provide it with credibility by funding it. So I think it's a little bit unfair of them of the Commission as an institution to expect funding to be sustainable within 3 years. But having said that, I appreciate that they wanted us to try. That's absolutely fine. So we are trying. The way we're approaching it is that we're looking at a few different business models, business cases. If we're providing services, and if we're able to provide services at a continental scale, where someone in a country that doesn't have access to skills or training or supports that we can provide access to and help them with, then we probably would look at a service model where we charge for that. Ideally, not that much, because it's not in our nature in this community to make a profit. So it would just be whatever we can calculate is the bare minimum for us to survive and to make ourselves sustainable. There's also the idea that maybe, like, lots of other wonderful networks we have in this community, like the PCST and Excite and UC. And apologies if I'm leaving out some of people's favorite networks, but maybe like a membership fee is something we might have to look at. And maybe we can talk to our other networks and see, is there something we can do? XI left out as well, the European Citizen Science Association. Perhaps together, if enough of us want to be part of all these networks, maybe we come up with a combined membership fee that gives us access to everything. On a more cynical note, and sorry, this is like one of those questions where I have too much to say and not enough time. We're just looking at the draft program for the next round of European funding. And I was just like doing Control F on searching for science communication being mentioned in the program. And the only place it's mentioned is a call that some of you might have seen in the last one, which is called Science Comes to Town. Again, I don't want to speak too out of turn, but Science Comes to Town is very similar to what others might have come across. European Researchers' Night, which has been running since 2005, has had more, I think, than 100 million invested in it. And to just have another version of that where we do science outreach, where we do events for people, without anything in the program to fund science communication research or anything to sustain a center that they fund in the last round, is wild. And the upsetting thing is that in the current draft program, there is only that one call for funding for Science Comes to Town, which they've said in the draft program will fund one project, and they'll fund it €6 million, which is wild that they would have 6 million, double what they funded a center for science communication, to do this science outreach in a few cities in Europe. So if any of you are as outraged by that as we are, then please also get in touch, because we're going to try and lobby the Commission over that and say, this is crazy. Like, it was bad enough that you stopped funding research in science communication, but if this is your view of how it should be sustainable by having another version of European Researchers' Night called Science Comes to Town, which to me, like, I've heard people respond to it saying it sounds like a horror movie or it sounds like a Christmas Carol. It's objectively a terrible name. Yeah. Yeah, Science Comes to Town is like, it's just, it even as a title, it feels uncomfortable for those of us who care about this field. That's like, it feels like an outdated version of how we might think about science. Probably I'll get into trouble for this, but the gossip around it is that our former European Commissioner for Research in Europe, Carlos Moedas, he's no longer in the Commission, but he's back in Portugal, and I think it sounds like it might have been him or his group that lobbied for Science Comes to Town, which I guess if you're a former European Commissioner, your views carry some weight. Now that's my own gossip. Gossip doesn't help, so I'm not probably helping the conversation there, but it kind of would make sense. At least that's something I could get my head around. It's like, oh, that's how we could end up with this terrible situation for funding science communication.
Thank you so much. I think we are opening other watermelon. So thank you. Thank you so much. We are conclude this meeting, and now is the closing. So yeah, everyone, I would like to have a photo, to take a photo to everyone in the photo call.